Today's video will be on pulling handles, and pulling handles just simply means taking a lump of clay and using gravity in the air to just make the clay stretch and form a long strip that can be bent in such a way to form a handle. So you'll see in today's video, I do not have any greenware. I don't have any work that's ready to actually apply a handle to, but that's okay. I want you to see that you don't need to. You can still practice the technique of making handles. I strongly encourage that, not waiting till you have cups or mugs, or even you may want to put handles on your historical vessel that's coming up. But this is just a glass base, and I often demonstrate handles to students this way, not necessarily a glass base, but I have used plastic containers or plastic buckets. So even something like your spray bottle, you can pretty much apply a handle on anything, but just keep in mind that eventually it's going to dry and of course come off because you're not bonding clay to clay. But it can be a really fun thing to do. Like I just moments before starting this video, I pulled a handle and just applied it. It kind of gives you a fun way to look at handles and not get so attached. So what I have here first is just to show you handles can be made many ways. They don't have to necessarily all be made from pulling, pulling handles. You could roll out a coil and make a handle that way. There's different loop tools that are pretty large. A loop tool is just usually it is a piece of, it's a tool that comes on the handle's made out of wood and it has a metal loop on it. And you can use that to just, take a slice into clay, and then it has a nice form little piece that you can then bend and shape into a handle. But for this video's purposes, I just want to show you what pulling a handle looks like. So I do have a lot of the steps already started to go right into how you could potentially, that's just a small rolled coil, not pulled, but just rolled, just like a coil on the table. And you could tear that in half, and you could have more pieces. You could actually really do a braid. I'm just gonna, for demo purposes, just show you how to make a handle that's just kind of twisted. You can see that. And it maybe isn't the most functional handle, but if the clay fits well enough and it's thick enough and durable enough, that could be a very nice decorative handle that would work just fine. Like I said, you could also have 3 pieces and braid it, and you can really become pretty elaborate with handles, right? You could take this, and the reason I started with this piece is just to show you how you can do coils or not coils, pulled handles. Both would work just fine, but you can set them up. So clay is really great in the fact that it's all about timing. So you can sit just like I showed with this piece on the glass base. I really moments ago, 10 minutes ago, just stuck that on, like I'll show you with this piece. So I have, it's drying out pretty quick. So I'm gonna take my spray bottle, spritz it down, and then just kind of play with pretending it's an actual clay form that I'm attaching it to. And I will go into these steps further, but I just want to, before this dries out too much, show you how decorative you can be with your handles. So that's slowly drying, and you can see it's already, hopefully you can see it's already starting to take shape, right? So the beauty of working on a surface like this, whoop, it just shifted. You can slowly, carefully manipulate the clay and then come back. So for example, you might want to use a little bit of a support, because if I just left this hang, most likely it's going to collapse and fall. but you can take a piece of clay, just a little support. So the weight, you can tuck it underneath. And then as it dries a little bit longer, that can rest under there and it won't collapse. So you can see, I'm going to turn it up and risk it. But once that dries, then you can play with the complete shape of that. It's wobbling, of course, quite a bit now, but hopefully you can see how that could be a very beautiful, ornate handle just by using coils and twisting them. So I'll sit that here for now. And this is just the step one. Step two, so I'll show you, this is just where you want to start with a hunk of clay and literally just a good piece of wedge clay. I still like to wedge the clay before I make handles. And again, a piece of clay, you just kind of want to taper it out. Almost if you were preparing, it's very similar to preparing a coil. You know, when you get started to make a coil, you kind of taper out the clay like so. Clay's getting a little dry, I'm just going to give it a little spritz. It's a very windy day, so I'm noticing that my clay is drying out a lot quicker. And it's not so humid, so that is another factor. So before you start making handles, you always want to have something underneath. Handles, again, is like you're holding up high and you're using gravity. So therefore, it's going to create a splash, messy pool underneath you. And I also should say here too, is it's best to stand doing handles. I have sat, you know, and made handles, but it doesn't work as good. You can really kind of just get the positioning of your body better, and you don't also make as much of a mess. So I have a ceramic bowl here made by yours truly. But you could get any kind of bowl. You could, any bucket, anything that can hold water. I have a little bit of water in here and got my sponge handy, and that's all you need. So your clay is like getting tapered. Tapered, I just mean it's stretching, right? So it's just getting to be a shape like this, but I like to have this might seem excessive, right? To make one handle, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, that's a lot of clay. But I often work that way because if you have too much to hold and you're only trying to make one handle at a time, it just doesn't work as well. So I like the top part, when I mean tapered, you'll see in a minute, I'll pull the handle and the clay will stretch, but the part up here I can hold on to, right? So if I have the clay like a knob almost at the top, I can really grip it well. And also I work this way because you can make multiple handles at one time. And I'll say it now, I'll say it again, when you make handles, make many. Do not just rely on making one and thinking, okay, that's gonna be enough. I strongly encourage students to always make more than one handle. Even if you know you want a specific type of handle, make at least two, if not more. So to begin pulling a handle, you're going to hold your clay up in the air over, of course, your bucket or bowl or what have you underneath it to trap, hold the water and catch it. It's also nice if I can just dip my hand right in it and start to stretch the clay. If my water was over here, I would just be dripping the slop, and it would be dripping on the floor from here to the bucket. So it's an obvious thing to point out, but it's something that you should be mindful of. So you're just holding the clay, and already you can see how it's using gravity, and it's just by a little bit of pressure and force, I'm squeezing and I'm pulling. So I'm gonna try a little bit further. So the motion is just like slaking the clay and applying, again, gripping up here, and then just using my hands to just slowly taper that down and use gravity. And you'll be able to see fairly quickly how you could make a 20-inch handle in no time. However, this comes with years of practice. I don't want you to get frustrated because making handles like this takes a great deal of time to understand and to grasp how hard you need to pull, how fast, the positioning of your fingers to make it different styles of handles. But it can be a really fun process. And you can see, here, sometimes you might want a really big, thick handle. Not necessarily that big, right? But when it comes to historical vessels that you'll all be making, you very well may want to put a handle on it or two. And so keep that in mind that, of course, depending on your size of work, a really itty bitty thin handle isn't necessarily the best, right? So we'll talk about that down the road, as well as I often think too, it's good to mention even on a functional form, a cup or something, a lot of students think that the handle has to be really big and thick, and a very small handle goes a long way. It can, you know, it looks very like it's not going to support it, but it does. Most important part is slipping and scoring and making sure that it's attached at the right timing of it so that it doesn't want to peel away in the drying process or the firing process. So you can see I've got a massive handle at this point. I'm just going to take my fingers and I'm just going to pinch it, and I'm just going to take that little excess clay that I don't need away. I'm dipping my fingers in my hand. You can see my hands are very slippery with water. If they weren't, you would want to drag, and that's when your clay can tear more easily. And that's all comes with practice. And so it's important here to explain that you can use your fingers to, and the top of your finger, like you can revolve the clay in circles. So you're hitting all parts, right? So you're going around and I'm turning with my left hand. And if that's how you would do it, if you want like a more circular, rounded, even handle, you can kind of see what that would look like if I were to bend it and turn it into a handle. Or you can take your fingers and almost use like a scissor, you know, put the clay in between, and a couple strokes like that would flatten. You saw before it was more rounded. Now it's more, has a flattened edge to it. You can also take this part of your finger and your thumb, and as you have the water that's slippery, you can run it down both sides, and that makes more of like a tapered, thicker. It's hard to see this, I know, but come closer. You can kind of see it's nice, it's getting thin. And up here is very thick, so I'm more kind of thinking about the handle down here, right? I'm not concerned with up here so much, unless I was applying this handle to a very large vessel or a jar, or all kinds of different handles. I'm thinking of a lug handle right now, where sometimes there's old water jugs and you'll see that they're just like a lug handle to be able to pick it up and carry it, because thousands of years ago or hundreds of years ago, whatever time period you're looking at, they very easily were used to hold water and store water in.